Yeah.
I have never met him, but he wanted to put in a comment. I sent him the link.
Yeah.
He then wrote back and said that he had put in a comment
Mhm.
and sent me a copy of it.
Okay.
I have a copy of it, but I don't know, you might want to check it.
I will do that. I will check.
Yeah, because it's a 4-page comment. It's not, it's a comment, it's a comment.
Okay.
3, 4, 5,
And
and then there's.
Oh, and
6 and
Ed's on,
7.
yeah, Ed's on there.
All right. We're ready.
And-
We're ready when you are, man.
Okay,
I'm not ready.
okay, thank you.
Just while you get ready, just a reminder that this is the only complaint we seem to get when we use the owl for meetings. It's just that it has trouble people hearing it, especially with masks on.
Yeah.
So if you can, just try to talk a little louder than normal.
The other thing that I've noticed is that when somebody speaks a whole sentence, the owl swivels and goes to them, and you can catch what they're saying. You can see who's talking, you can catch it. If they say something quickly, like somebody says, let's have the vote, and somebody says, yes, I have no idea. It's like a disembodied yes, I can't tell who it is. And on one of the counts, I got about 12 yeses and 3 no. It's like, wait a minute, something wrong here, you know? So, yeah, if you,
We'll do roll
maybe,
calls.
yeah, or
Jeanette and
maybe,
talked
yes,
about
I
this, and
fully
she's
agree,
gonna-
or something, I don't know.
She's
Maybe
gonna
something
do the
needs to be
roll
done.
call votes from now on, so
Yeah.
we're sure that she has exactly.
That would be helpful,
Everything.
yeah. I got one other suggestion. I spoke with the reporter at the Times Record. The Times Record, once again, got the population of Topsham wrong. And it was the second time I'd seen that. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. And so I called them. And she had a suggestion that I thought was a good one, which was that after the vote, I announced what vote I got. In other words, if it was 8-1 or if it was 7-2 or whatever it was, announce the count. And then if it is wrong, you guys can speak up and correct, okay? So I wouldn't mind if we did that.
Whatever makes it easier for you, absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got the worst job in the place. Do we have the minutes from the public hearing on the 26th?
I have not done a summary of those.
Okay,
minutes
that's
yet.
fine.
I'm sorry to
that's
say,
fine.
I
just
will
need
do
to
so, but I have
remember.
not yet.
The date on my notes.
Took a bunch of notes, but it didn't put names or anything to it.
Oh, I have names online. I just, and now I think I know which one is which, so.
All right. Okay. Call to order at 6:04. Who's going to the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have an addendum. We do have a quorum. There are 2 individuals at this time who are absent, Tyler and Carrie. Carrie won't be here. Tyler may join us later on. And then, of course, Marilyn and Ed are zooming in this evening.
Let's see, Mario and Ed, what?
They're zooming. They're
There's-
remote. Any public comments?
Go ahead, Jeanette.
Yeah, as I mentioned, a gentleman I do not know, contacted me after the article that went in the newspaper. He tracked me down. He tracked down my husband turned him over to me. Anyway, this gentleman, his name is Bill Moran, he lives at 6 Front Street in Topsham, has written us a 4-page letter.
I know Bill quite well.
Yeah, I do not, but in any event. So I don't want to read you the whole 4-page letter. I think Mark is going to check. It should have come through on the public comment line. And I'm not sure if it did or didn't, but he doesn't have it yet. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of it. So this gentleman quoted from a book by Jeffrey Herman called Municipal Charters, a comparative analysis of 75 Maine charters from a Maine townsman in August 1992. And the paragraph he quotes says, the significance of a municipal charter at least for the 75 towns and cities in Maine that have adopted one, can hardly be exaggerated. A charter is the municipal equivalent of a state or federal constitution, and it is within a municipal charter where such essential questions as the structure of the government, the distribution of powers within the government, and a city's access to government are more or less completely answered. A municipal charter is a primary document, a taproot expression of local control, home rule authority congealed. And then he gives a great deal actually of other information that is useful, but on his final page, one of the things that he says towards the end, he says, he writes, a charter is an inevitable obligation to be accomplished and should be tended fully, promptly, and exceptionally. The completion of a new Topsham municipal charter effort, as started now, should continue by a continuing effort by citizens until finished and ratified, as it is long unresolved. He goes on to make a number of specific suggestions. One is, and these are suggestions, the charter could add 2 more selectmen to the board if needed per findings of the commission. The charter requires 5 to 7 designated districts for the same number of board members per finding of the commission. And then he sees the absence of a personal administrative office or the function of a personnel administration office as a lack. He said that he says that Topsham had such a board years ago, and he cannot find anything similar right now. And then he points out that from his perspective, it is difficult to extract financial data from the budget for Topsham, so he would like to see that addressed. The town meeting warrant is not useful unless the item or position is a 1-line purchase, and the yearly town report should be available in composition as in past years. I'm not sure I understand that completely. And payroll salaries should be public, and all functional expenditures should be explicit. And he has a great deal more in here, but that's like the top and the top line and the bottom line.
So it's on the website.
I just quickly checked it. I couldn't find it, but I'll look more tomorrow. If I don't, I'll get Jeanette's copy. And we'll send it
Yeah,
out.
I can send you this copy because I mean, if he was kind enough to comment, we might as well take it in.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can give him a call and ask him to send it to all of us or to resend it if you have a
He
problem.
sent this to me by email, so I can easily just send it to you unless you prefer to get it from him
No,
directly.
it's fine.
Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to, we had talked before about having some new questions for the attorney, and this one is probably a before and an after issue after we talked about some of the other issues we want to look at. But I just wanted to be sure everyone had a chance to review the attorney's decision that was attached to our report. She did a fantastic job for summarizing, I did find her way here, of summarizing what you need a charter for, what you don't need.
Something smells burnt.
Can or can't use, because when we were looking at it previously, we were trying to see if there were ways that we can just address certain issues through ordinance or through policy, and that's where this came from. And so, as you can tell, there's very little latitude in terms of what can be done without a charter, if there are specific things you want to
That was
address.
the November 9th of 2020.
Yeah, that was the one that I wrote.
Yeah, okay.
But in the, at the end, we attached the comments, and they are, you know, she talks about
It's like,
how everything, just the different things, the committee could be created by different ways, but if it were vested with any powers, then it needs a charter, you know, so forth and so on. It's very, you know, very explicit about what can and can't be done. So I think basically at this point, it's a matter of maybe identifying some of the things people might be interested in studying further for inclusion in a potential charter. And then once we get that identified, then we can address questions to the attorney and we can maybe come to a consensus on how we want to proceed. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. I just wanted to say that one of the things we heard from people who attended the public hearings was that the warrant was not available early enough and that it didn't contain enough explanation of what was in the warrant. Now, I know that at town meeting, Dave has begun a tradition of discussing what's in each section of the warrant. And that is helpful if you're at town meeting, but if before you want to go to town meeting, you want to prepare, you want to understand more fully what you're going to be voting on, not having any explanation of the warrant articles when the warrant comes out, I think is problematic. So if we want to sort of back up the timing that the warrant comes out, I don't know if we do or not. I'm just putting that out there as an issue that was brought up. And I know that people have been talking about not fully understanding the warrant. Now, those of us who have served on the finance committee or in town, we understand what everything that's on the warrant and all the issues that go into it. But I think that a written explanation of the process that both the select board and the finance committee go through, and a written explanation of some of the details that we usually get orally at the town meeting to come out before the meeting itself would be something that would be worth having. And if we need, it looks like we may need a charter to do that.
There
Well,
would be a
what it
question
says
for-
is, if you want to alter the statutory procedures or timeframes for calling a town meeting, posting a warrant, and a bunch of other things, then those that are currently set out in state law, but if you want to change them at all, you have to have a charter.
Aren't the time limits that are set out in state law the minimum amount of time?
Yes, I believe so.
So, I mean, we used to start the budget process in December and be well done before this process even starts now.
So the process, you know, I can explain how we do it. if you like. So we put out a schedule of the town budget meetings somewhere in November.
I've served on the finance committee for many years, so I know the general process.
Okay, great.
I'm just looking at, I know that we heard a lot of comments about the warrant, and I'm looking at the attorney's comments from here. I see he's, one of the bullets says that if we want to change the timing of the warrant, we need to have a charter. That's all I'm getting at this point. And so.
Put that on our list of ID issues.
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
further discussion.
exactly,
There you go.
that's what I'm doing.
All right. The first issue is to change timing of warrant release.
And actually, on that same subject, you may remember that at the first, I believe it was in maybe December 5th or 6th, and one of the first meetings that was focused on public input, I think it was Doug Bennett, who, among others, who spoke to actually the wish to have an informational meeting before the actual town meeting. And to me, that speaks to the wish to talk to one's neighbors about what's going on. And to, you know, that idea that others have expressed here about how it's valuable to have that conversation with one's neighbors. And it seems to me that that informational meeting would move in that direction. I thought it was a good idea when you mentioned it, and that's right along the lines of what Denise is talking about.
Except that we do have a public hearing for the warrant that occurs before it's published. So I guess the question is there a form that public hearing could take that would be more inviting? Or offer more explanation so that people are want to come in this way, let's say by Zoom, so they know what they're going to be voting on eventually.
It almost seems like maybe Jeanette's talking about something slightly different, because the purpose of the public hearing in the warrant is so the select board can decide exactly, make the final decision what's going on.
Right.
It almost sounds like what Jeanette's asking for is a informational meeting to review, maybe in more detail, the items that are going to be coming up at town meeting. So if someone wants to come get more information about or ask questions about particular items, they have a chance to do it and then study and think in advance before they vote. Is that what you're?
When I
Well,
was
it
in
wasn't my
West
idea,
Bath,
it was
we-
this citizen's idea,
Yeah.
but yes, that's it, yeah.
When I was with West Bath, we always had an informational meeting before town meeting. And it was great because we were able to address a lot of questions and minimize confusion, that type of thing. Attendance was generally fairly good.
So should we put that as item number 2 for further discussion in the future?
That required info meeting.
I guess one of the questions I have then is, I mean, once we've locked in the warrant, if we have the info meeting after that, and there come up, any problems come up or issues, is it possible at that point to amend the warrant? Because my experience, I'm remembering the time we had a sign ordinance that the planning board had put forward. Like, do you remember this, Peter? And people got very upset about this proposed sign ordinance at town meeting, Michelle Moody in particular, I think. And at town meeting, we actually voted down that sign ordinance and sent it back to the planning board for rewriting. So I guess my only question is it possible to amend the warrant after that meeting? Or do we need to hold that meeting before the warrant is finalized so that those kinds of issues can hopefully be ironed out ahead of time?
I think we could, correct me if I'm wrong, we're trying to identify a list so that we can prioritize, and then we can nail down the details in the future. We can discuss that specific topic. Is that what you're aiming for?
That makes sense. I agree with that. Thank you.
This is why you should be sitting
Oh, you're doing a great job.
there.
She does.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get to, I think last meeting is said something about looking at the number of select people.
I mean, it just was an idea that came into my head while people were talking about the fact that some districts aren't represented. I thought, you know, Dave did make a very good point that we do sometimes have trouble now getting enough people to run. So, I mean, if we have 7 members instead of 5, will we have that much more difficulty getting people to run?
But you know what, it occurred to me that if you did have, well, if you had 7 districts and 7 members, it would actually in fact be much easier for people to run because they'd be running in their own neighborhood, not town-wide. So you might actually find it easier to run if you had those 2 things together.
So would you say add just districts to the list as well?
I would say so, just for discussion, sure.
Or add maybe a discussion about the number of members.
I'd put that down too.
Select board, yeah. One thing I would like to know more about or think about as a group is whether the code of conduct that we have for the selectmen and the town manager are enough ethics rules for our town. And I'm not so concerned about the code of conduct for those two groups, but more, do we have any form of code of conduct for our boards and committees?
Does chapter 7 apply to boards and committees? You know?
I can get.
Because there's a, that's the whole.
That's the state
Yeah,
ethics rules, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it does apply to volunteer boards and committees.
I almost don't think it does.
Yeah.
okay.
However, you certainly want to be careful with your planning board and conflicts of interest and things like that.
So would you want to summarize that into one topic?
I'd just say ethics rules.
Additional ethics
for
rules.
boards and committees or additional ethics.
Well, along that same line, if you have ethic rules, then they have to have consequences, ways of removing people that violate the ethic rules, which we don't have.
Well, I mean, first of
Other
all,
than that,
does our select board censure? Can they censure themselves, other members? Because I don't know that you need to actually remove elected individuals from office. I'm not a huge fan of the recall issue.
I didn't see anything in the town code about that. As far as the committees though, the selectmen can appoint and they can unappoint.
There we go.
I'm sorry, can the selectmen unappoint from committees?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. At the
If
end
they
of the
appoint you
term
to
or
a
just in
committee,
the
they can
middle?
throw you all right.
So
They can? I did not know that.
So if there's a code of conduct and you violate it, so,
It's
yeah,
just
so
170.
it's okay, if there's a code of conduct, then and if you violate it, the selectmen would at least have something to measure whether they should remove you from the committee or not.
For the committee, but that's in town code.
What's in town?
The ethic rules, the code of conduct is in the town code.
But it doesn't apply. I know that the
It doesn't
towns
apply.
doesn't apply to boards.
It
and
doesn't
committees.
apply, but town code can be changed to have it apply to.
Yeah.
That's
it-
a question
it
for the attorney,
could.
and we.
Yeah, let's just put that on the topic. That's a good question.
I'm sorry, so what's the topic here?
Code of conduct for boards and committees.
Yeah, I got that, but was there, were you adding another, I mean, I think your point was maybe a chart, this doesn't belong on a charter or,
Yeah, I'm saying that it's in town code and town code can be changed.
If it's permitted.
Yeah.
Under state rules.
Yeah, we'll have to.
We'll have to, these are questions for the.
So maybe the two discussion points are, do we want to extend more ethics rules for committees, selectmen, staff? Then the second one is, if we extend, or if we have more ethics rules, do we have a way to enforce them?
Yeah.
There could be things from ranging from censure to removal to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Hi, guys. So I think your questions on the code of conduct is answered in the Government Improvement Committee report, the great big one. And the answer to the question was, yes, it could be changed. And they had recommended that the town adopt an ethics policy through an ordinance, not a charter. But there's a big section on it in that, if you wanted to look.
Yeah. I agree, Marilyn, I had read that actually. And then I asked a member of the select board why it hadn't been done yet. And given that this report dates from 2009, am I correct? The first Government Improvement Committee review, this one
The one
It's
with
2008, 2009. I just remember from
with
that
Red
timeline.
Rents and Rink.
Yeah.
The Board of Selectmen response was, well, no one has led the charge. And then my understanding was that that's not within this committee's purview, or that's what I was told, to lead a charge to change ordinances. So I'm kind of torn. If we can't lead the charge to change the ordinances, then I would be inclined towards the charter. So that's kind of the rub on that.
Okay.
Jeanette, you were, I know you had a couple of things you were thinking about in terms of,
Yeah. One of them is similar to kind of an adjunct to earlier items, which is the idea that information in our governments, be they local or state or federal, is open to the public with some exceptions, like personnel rules and some police records and stuff like that. So there are things that are not open to the public, but those rules are written down in state law. There's a law, it's the public access law, and it tells us what is available to the public and what is not. And most is, but there are some things that are not allowed to be, you cannot ask for them. You can ask, but you will not get them. And this is not working here too well because we don't have the very first thing that's requested, which is a public access officer. And the public access officer, as I understand it, is a person who is the point person to whom a request for information from a town or any government is addressed. It identifies it, puts a big hat on their head and says, it's me. You want to know about the electric bills? You want to know about the schedule of the playing field? You want to know about whatever it is you want to know about? You come here and you ask me. It identifies the person because that way the members of the public do not have to first figure out who do I ask? And that could be a hard question, frankly. So if possible to include in a charter, I would like to draw the attention. I talked to Mark about this a little bit. He said he thought maybe they have a public access officer, but if so, that person is not noted on the website. It is a secret public access officer.
So is that
And
an
a
issue?
secret public access officer is not in line with state law. If you have a public access officer, you have to identify the person so the public may tell who it is, may figure out who it is.
So is that an issue in the, how the government's run, in efficiency, or is that just like a, I don't know, something that should be handled
Well,
not in this group?
I mean, I think it's a state law, point number one, but I think that if such an item were mentioned in a charter, it could draw attention to the need to have this done, and it could also make it a little bit more specific. So for example, the state law says towns, municipalities, and other organized and unorganized territories will appoint a public access officer. But we could make that a little bit more specific. We could say our town will appoint a public access officer after the November town meeting, in the first regular meeting after, identify a time at which this is supposed to be done. And then within 1 month after the vacancy of the position or something like that. I mean, it could make it draw attention to the fact that this would be useful, that this would be appreciated, that people do sometimes have trouble getting information from the town, and that it could kind of put a couple specifics around it to make it work a little bit better. I mean, I just love the concept of a secret public access officer. That's just,
So if I understand it correctly, the issue that you want this commission to look at isn't the efficiency of if it's working now, but if we should take into consideration if it would benefit us to make it more specific and more Topsham focused, the description of this. Because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to help with the efficiency that. I mean, I'm a federal employee, I understand sometimes there's difficulties, but I would have to go to like HR or somebody to resolve that issue.
I'm sorry, you would have to do what?
Go to HR or somebody to resolve an issue or their boss or whatever, but I don't think we're gonna be able to help you talk about the efficiency of that position.
Well, I don't think help with the efficiency is needed. The state law lays out the criteria. They say if a member of the public requests information, within 5 days, the public access officer will reply. And the public access officer may say, we're working on it. Or they may say, that piece of information does not exist. Or they may provide it. They have options. But I mean, sometimes it takes more than 5 days to find things and pull them together, and that's fine. There's a whole process laid out. After another 30 days, the public access officer now has to reply again and say, we're still working on it. We're really sorry we don't have it yet. We're working on it. And that's a legitimate reply. Or they can say, we have been working on it, but we have found it does not exist. You can't have it because it isn't there. And that's a legitimate reply too. But it's just this process for, attempting to answer requests from members of the public about this government that I am told here in this room, we are the final authorities on, that we are the people who run the government. If so, we should be able to get information about what's going on. We should be able to ask for a document and get it. It says other things, like it says, just because something hasn't been printed out, that's not an excuse not to provide it. It says that kind of thing. It says, but at the same time, it says it's very strong on the point that, and I've had this happen, not here, but in another state, where if you ask for something that just doesn't exist, there is no obligation to go create it. And that's very reasonable.
And it's true.
So, it's just got this whole system. All that's really needed is something that would draw the attention of the select board to this, and maybe put a couple of details on it, like timing of when this person will be appointed, and that their name shall be put on the website, so that people may find it, that kind of thing.
So by default, I am the public access officer.
Well,
So we can put that on the website. I didn't know it was an issue. In my 3 years here, there has never been a case where somebody requested something that wasn't in response to that individual information.
This may be true in your 3 years. I started asking about this in 2015, when I was unable to get a document that I asked for that clearly should have been public. The guys who asked for the electric bills, now I understand there were problems with this, because I understand there were 36 different electric bills, but it took them between 6 and 9 months to get them. And part of the problem they had was, who do we ask? Who has them? They didn't know. And so they had to figure that out first. So, it doesn't always work. And no offense, because I have not tried that since you have been here. I'm not commenting about current staff at all, but I am saying that sometimes it doesn't work. And it would be nice to draw attention to it and ask that attention be given. And I don't know about the concept of default.
Well, it's not default. It's law. There's rules, and our board of selectmen, as well as the management, has to go through training, refresher training every year.
Every time a new
Okay.
person is elected.
Well, I didn't see that in the state law, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist someplace else.
Yeah, they
didn't
do
see-
for any town, like I have to administer or make sure I have it for members of the budget advisory committee when I was with the county and everything else. It is required within a certain amount of time after someone newly elected select person
Right.
comes on board, they have to go through the training.
Right.
So it's.
Oh, yeah, I know that training is required. That's quite true. The part that I don't know is if no public access officer is stated, then we assume it's person X. That part I'm not aware of, but maybe it's there somewhere. But in any event, I think it would be nice to put a note on that in the charter, because it would draw attention to the fact that this is needed. That if we are indeed allowed to, indeed entitled to, get information about what the town is doing, then it's a good idea to identify the person you're supposed to ask. And then the process takes on from there. There's no need to write a law. The law exists. It's just, it would be nice to draw attention to the fact that it's important to implement that law.
Denise, and you've been patient here.
So maybe, I'm just trying to formulate this a little bit. I do think that the responsibility to identify a public access officer rests with the town manager under our current form of government.
I believe that is incorrect. I believe it belongs with the select board to appoint a public access officer.
I always appointed, yeah, usually I served as it, but if I didn't, I appointed.
So is this something we want to put on our list?
Yeah, we should.
I would just add it.
Okay.
We should just invest.
We can discuss it further.
We certainly can, yeah. That's something.
I thought it was Rose.
Can I talk for 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's really hard to jump in. It's hard to jump in from the Zoom.
So you got a hand, or raising your hand?
I'm on my cell phone right now, and I'm having a hard time finding the hand raising button, but anyways, I just wanted to just go off what Janine was saying a little bit. And, maybe there's a broader issue there of updating the public access requirements to a better level, like we recently did with the Fair Board. We changed all the bylaws so that, you know, there was also an electronic notification component, and, you know, it's not like stick it in the paper anymore. You know, you stick it in the paper 7 days before. There was other, you know, levels that we wanted there to be met so that people could get the information in the way that people get information today and not the way they got it 200 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, the way people get, we've noticed this before, the way people gather information is different. Some people do read the crier. Some people look at the town website. Some people only look at Facebook. Some people only look at
Right.
Twitter. Everybody's gathering their information from different sources. And I think, I mean, I kind of agree with Marilyn. It may, if possible to do, and this would take thought and work, obviously, it would probably be helpful to be able to address that. That's a technology issue and a couple other things in there too, but I mean, if possible, that would certainly be a good addition. But
Right.
my only point was to try to find a way to draw attention to the fact that people cannot get information. And sometimes they can, but other times they cannot.
Well, we
I had a
will go
question.
ahead and put it on the part on it. And look at it as we go through. I'm sorry, Peter.
When you say that this is in state law, now you're referring to the laws having to do with freedom of information law?
Yeah, I think
Freedom of
I
access
see
to
that
Maine.
different than just, I mean, that's a formal process. When you say, when you want
It is.
information, do you apply, request it in writing?
Yes, but Peter, the problem we have here, that's quite true. But the problem we have here is figuring out to whom to write. For example, if you write to the chair of the select board, you may or may not get a reply. If you write to the town manager, I don't mean this town manager, you may not get a reply for 1 year. At which point your point of your request is moot. If you ask somebody who is a staff member who reports to the town manager and they say no, for
I
some
was just-
reason, it isn't right,
I was
then
just trying to
the only
determine
person
which
you can
law
refer to is the
talking
town
about.
manager, who
Yeah.
takes a year to reply to requests. I mean, it's just, you can't always get what you need.
Federally, it's the Freedom of Information Act. In the state, it's Freedom of Access Act.
Right, it's the
But they're
state version.
basically one and the same.
They are, they're very similar.
And we get
Differences.
trained on it every
Yeah.
time we're elected.
Like I said,
So,
I've never had that issue. I either go to the town manager or Rose. And we get-
Well, yeah, they like you better than they like me.
can I add another possibility?
Yeah.
As I'm looking through this, I don't know what state law says about qualifications for running for office. And it would be nice to know what it does say. So whatever is in 30A, 25, 26, I'd like to know what's there, and whether we need to add anything related to, say, someone's criminal history in terms of either school board or select board. Or any other qualifications we feel that we want to discuss, that people should have before they run for office in town.
I guess that maybe a side issue for that might be who sets the qualifications for school board. Because maybe we can't change that, maybe that's something that gets set at different.
I believe we can, because each town has its own method of electing its school board members. So for example, we don't elect ours at town meeting, but Bodenham does.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't elect our school board members at
Yes.
town meeting.
They're on the ballot,
No.
and that's an official town meeting. That is. the
Okay,
town
but
meeting.
no, they actually elect people at their in-person town meeting, Peter.
Well, we go to Berlin to the polls.
Well, Peter, you're just being argumentative and difficult at the moment.
So the question of the lawyer would just be if we wanted to change the qualifications from the state's definition, do we
Right,
need a charter or can we do it?
right, exactly.
Which I'm pretty sure any deviation for anything like that, you need a charter to do. It's my understanding. Okay. You sure?
Oh, we got enough here.
Do you have anything
As long as you're including the, do we have a way to enforce the ethics rules? That's all like,
Okay.
everything else on my list was covered.
Ed,
Yes,
what are your thoughts, Ed? I know you have them.
He certainly does.
I'm just listening to everything that's being discussed right now. I'm hearing it.
You have anything you'd like to add to it, to the list?
Not at this time.
Marilyn, Carrie, anything?
I wondered about the legality of allowing remote participation in town meeting.
Allowing who participate?
Allowing remote participation. I think that's one of the things we heard a lot was people that can't make it to town meeting. And is it possible for us to allow for the in-person town meeting to allow remote participation?
Yeah, I
I
think
think
that's
there was-
interesting.
I
think
think
that's
there
a really
was
interesting-
talk about the fact that you couldn't have, you couldn't verify their taxpayer voting status. I think that's the biggest trouble with that.
Do they verify that now?
Yeah.
Show your ID.
Or do it?
When you
Okay.
checked in at the fairgrounds, there was a table you went in to
Oh,
make
that's
sure you
right,
were
there
a
is a
resident.
check-in.
Or at the school.
Yeah, or at the school.
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, but I think, that's a really good point, but I think Marilyn also has a point because the world does not exist by in-person participation these days. And it would be helpful, if possible, to do legitimately, it would be helpful to allow that because we might get more people, which would be great.
It may require a change in state law.
Well, it might, and that would be a bit of a hurdle there, but I mean, I think it should be looked at. I think she's right. I think it should be looked at because it would be very helpful if it was indeed proper and possible.
Well, we can get an opinion on that and see if there's anything that we can do to help that issue along.
Yeah,
And I think there are answers to the problem of checking people's,
There's a lot of logistics to that. I think that could be troublesome.
well, yeah, although people could get unique, it would probably involve collecting people's emails and sending out unique Zoom links,
Oh,
unique
yeah.
links to people. So that happens occasionally in other organizations I've participated in where you have to pre-register for something and then they send you a link that's specifically tied to you. No one else can use it.
and actually, when you do that, if you have Zoom set up correctly, and I had this happen once, I had two guys from Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia maybe, participating in one of my Zoom meetings, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is not right. But if you set it up right, if you send out that unique link and you require people to log in, you can trace that back to the IP address of the computer. Now, that's not exactly the same thing as tracing it back to the person because their husband could be running the computer, not them. And you don't, but maybe if you made them appear on screen, you actually, yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, we would have to,
If I can throw if I can put my 2 cents worth on that idea. You know, we've talked and we've already agreed that town meeting is the form of government we want. And if the people really care, they'll come out to the town meeting. I think if we continue to be too lazy and sit on and depend on Zoom instead of coming out and using their purest form of government as a town meeting to come together, I think really that's the best way to check your voter eligibility as well as truly get to communicate to each other and converse amongst ourselves.
Well, state law is being made right now without that. So I think it actually could be done. I understand that it might not be as community building as town meeting, but I wonder if it would expand participation. Bye, Ed.
We can check the legality and go back to it. We're just gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll check.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think those are actually real issues, but yes, we could put it on the list and come back.
Yeah. Okay. Now, is there anyone see any need to address things like, the, voter initiative, something like that?
I'm sorry.
Are you happy with the process?
But what voter initiative, what are we talking about?
If the voters want to initiate, petitions and number of, something like that.
You know, actually, I did have a thought that was related to that. Actually, one thing I would like to discuss is committee structure and who is related to whom and how they work, how things get to the point of being on the select board agenda or on the warrant. That's something I wanted to say. That might seem like a non sequitur, but it isn't. So that's one of my items, committee structure.
And can we ask the attorney, what is the current state law about citizen petitions? I mean, I know that in order to get an
For the
item-
town warrant,
Yeah,
I think it's 10% of the voters at the last election.
Last gubernatorial election, I think. Yes, I think you're right.
oh, yeah,
And actually-
that sounds familiar.
I would like to discuss that too, because I wonder, well, there is room for debate on this, but because of one comma in the law, but it appears as if our town ordinances say that we are supposed to have 4 town meetings a year. Now, we can debate that because there is a comma. And it's unclear whether the part after the comma applies to the entire sentence or just to the last clause. And that's a judge has to decide that. But in any event, I think it might be useful to have more than one town meeting, or we have 2, I guess, technically now, but to have them more frequently. And I would like that on the agenda to discuss more frequently. And also that question of, is that 10%, is that appropriate? Or would a different number be better in one way or another? I think I would like to ask that question too.
What is that question?
So one question
I got
is,
to have town meeting more frequently. And what was,
yes, and if the powers that be or a judge, I think it would take a judge, determines that the ordinance says that we're supposed to have town meeting 4 times a year, how come we're not? And if the judge says it isn't, then maybe we should change the ordinance, I think. Maybe we should have town meeting more frequently is my point. That's one point.
The other question was about citizen petitions.
Yes, the other question is the criteria for citizen petitions.
yeah, or the types of issues that can be addressed by them. Sometimes, with the charter, you can limit the things that can be changed by a citizen petition. I guess I would like to know some more information on that whole
Yeah.
process.
I have another item, and I know Peter may disagree with me here. And it is my understanding that generally speaking, a well thought out rule requires that items not be added to a warrant at the meeting itself. I think it's a very sound rule, because otherwise you're dumping something new on people that they haven't thought about, and it doesn't make any sense. However, in the book that Marilyn recommended we read, they talked about the idea of a new business section. They talked about it in glowing terms. In a new business section, you cannot, in the book or in reality, you cannot propose an item that's then going to be voted on and become binding law. But you could propose something that was more like a straw poll. For example, you could say, we, the citizens, ask the select board to please focus on X in the next 6 months, as much as possible. That wouldn't be a binding vote. It would be a statement of wish of the town. Something like that, I think, could be very useful. And I don't mean to say that people could propose new things like, let's wipe out the police department and instead have a new department X. I mean, no. But it would probably be more useful for something that was more like one way to take the temperature of the town with regard to this issue or that issue, in the book that Marilyn recommended, they did that same thing with national issues, which obviously have nothing to do with local government and which local government can do nothing about. But in Marilyn's book, they argued that it was useful, that it got the attention of the state government and sometimes the federal government, because town meeting is the purest form of democracy. And if 20 or 50 different towns in a state vote for something, it means that a lot of people support it, and then they take note. It's a way to get the word up and down the ladder, what people are interested in. But if you guys don't mind, I'd like to have a question as to whether we could consider a new business section of town meetings. It's not really new business in the sense of something new that you're going to vote to implement. It's more like an opinion, you know,
Public comments. At the end
comments,
of the
yes.
meeting.
Something like that. And actually, even though I would appreciate that if it could be discussed, I also see some disadvantages to it. A, length of meeting. B, you might get some really wild proposals that. But the book says that those die because they don't get a second. Or even if they get a second, they get voted down. So I don't know. There are things to discuss.
Well, then again, you can't vote if it hasn't been advertised, duly advertised and made public before. So that's the.
No,
point.
you can't have a binding vote for something that, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm just reading the book. I was told to read this book. I went and read the
Well,
book.
oh, yeah,
You know,
and
I
the
thought
thing with the book is that there are slight variations from state to state. I believe the person who wrote that was from Vermont.
Yes.
No. So there are slight variations, but you know,
Do you know that that is impossible here in this state,
well,
to have a new business section? As I've described,
you can have something like that, but absolutely no vote can be taken on
are you sure?
it. Yeah, it all has to be duly advertised, right?
I would think,
Yeah.
So.
because even if you just try to get people's sentiment, you might have had a different group of people come up to get the sentiment if they.
I agree,
knew
that
what
is
was
a
being
problem.
discussed.
Yeah. Well, but then, I don't know how they're doing it. I would like to know more about it.
Could there
Different state
be
laws.
a,
Different
yeah,
state.
different state law?
It's a different state.
Could there be a section of town meeting that would allow people to suggest topics for future town meetings?
Yeah, exactly, something like
Um,
that. A statement of interest in topic X or topic Y.
So the question for tonight, I guess, is that possible? To have a
Yes.
section of town meeting to take public comment or suggestions?
Exactly, yeah, something like that. And I'm gonna, in my notes, I'm gonna call it new business just because that's what they called it in Maryland's book. But I recognize that that may not fit in state law exactly.
Let's see. I think that most of the other, or a lot of the other things in here are things that would require some, would pertain more to change in the form of government, but now the transfer of funds between accounts, spending for emergencies. I don't know what the limits are.
It sounded like that was pretty covered. Dave went over that
Are we
detail.
okay with that?
I'm sorry, how is the spending for emergencies handled?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded to me like we vote to approve a budget at the bottom dollar, and then if there's an emergency, they can switch as needed.
Within
Really?
the article, in the warrant article.
Within
Right.
that article, but
Right.
not within.
Well, but they cover a lot in the budget article, don't you? It's generally a large piece of the budget, if not the whole.
Large chunk, yeah.
Yeah.
So that generally the thought is that because it is a large chunk that it's approved, if something shifts, you're gonna be able to move something
I
to
think
achieve.
what-
Is that does that work? Is that working?
It works. We want to stay with what's appropriate within the article. We want to spend it like that.
I think this would refer more to, say your police department had 16 vacancies for the year. And you had all of this money that wasn't getting spent. But then in public works, there was a huge water line project that came up that had to be done. You have to have a town meeting to transfer it from police to public works. I think that's what we're
I think
Talking
they're
about.
in the same, I
They're
need
in
to
separate
see-
articles.
They're separate articles,
Yeah.
okay,
Public
I
Works
can't
is solid
remember.
waste.
The separate funds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you would have to have a town meeting to transfer funds for that.
The only thing that's not clear is if we were to declare a state of emergency or a town emergency, gives the town manager, and it's clear in the code, the ability to spend without authorization, in other words, and to move people and resources.
To meet the needs of
Defining that more
emergency.
clearly would be good in my opinion, because we just did this last March when COVID hit.
Mhm.
Exactly what-
Relates to an emergency.
No, not so much that is my concern, but maybe the time, because right now it's only 55 days before it needs to get renewed. That could be one. The other one is, to what extent of the budget, does that mean unassigned fund balance? Does that mean switching between the articles? And I think when this was written for good reason, then I don't think it really applied to a pandemic, more of a natural disaster. However, when the pandemic hit, we didn't know what would happen at that time. So we did
Could I
that.
also ask,
That would be great
in this
information.
particular form of government, who declares the emergency?
The town manager does.
The town manager does?
Yes, and with concurrence from the select board chair.
Huh,
Now, in order for it to be renewed, the select board would have to renew that state of emergency after the 5 days.
yeah, so I see. So the town manager, so a non-elected person, the town manager, having consulted with one elected person, can do this for 5 days.
Well, if you think about this in a real disaster, I use
Right.
Katrina as an
Exactly.
example.
Exactly right. So there are times when action has to be taken. That is quite true.
And that's,
But then after 5 days, that's supposed to give room for the select board to meet and discuss and deliberate, et cetera,
right.
and then extend if appropriate. Yes.
That's true. With the COVID thing, it opened up, everybody was facing the same situation.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Do you stay at home? Do you not touch anything? You remember when this thing first
Oh,
came
yeah.
about? What we did here was with a select board vote with me. We made that 30 days before we have to renew. Not 5 days, because we have to get back together anyways. We knew that was
That is a
gonna
really interesting case because it wasn't the kind of, the train carrying nuclear waste running off the track. It wasn't the kind of thing that, you're going to have to deal with instantly, but then within a period of time, you're going to have a handle on it. This was longer in duration. Yeah, it was a little bit different, wasn't it?
What we did was we only extended that emergency for 30 days.
Yeah.
I think we might have extended an additional 30 days, we did, but then we stopped.
Yeah,
Unlike, I'll use some towns next to us.
Yeah.
They did it to change a policy,
yeah,
to wear masks or
Yeah.
do other things. We didn't do that, but I think that would depend on who the elected officials are
yeah,
and your management at the time, not to,
exactly. Well, I mean, and at some point you have to rely on those people. They're elected and they're duly appointed and,
so I guess the only thing I would look at based on this current experience is at what point in that emergency, and this may never happen again or it may, can we move money?
That's
that is a great question.
The other thing that I was thinking about.
When I was, I had an article in the warrant, I would put one in that allows the select board to transfer up to like 10% or something from one line to another, and we got away with it. I mean, but it was in the warrant. And that power was approved by the voters.
So I just think of it. So, in terms of attracting citizens to serve on our boards and committees, it's my understanding now that there actually is a committee for town meeting, but there's no one on it. Is that correct? There's no town meeting committee.
There is a town meeting committee on the town's webpage that speaks about vacancies.
But there is no one on it, correct?
Oh, you know
What is
what?
it?
I'm sorry, it might be a word thing, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Town committees.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah,
maybe there's a typo there. So it's just town committees and then you have all the committees underneath
I think
there.
there's
So-
a typo in my brain, but there's a page on the town's website that says, here are the volunteer positions that are open. On that page, it says that there is a town meeting committee and that 5 places on it are open. Or
Correct.
maybe it said there were 2 places that were open.
Okay.
I think the whole thing's open. I know.
Okay, so
So
we
maybe we
admit
have-
the webpage is wrong, and we accept that there is a committee, and that we know that there's nobody on it.
Right.
Thank
Exactly.
you. Thank you.
So so I wanted to ask about, is there some way that we can look at, drafting people? That's-
I'm sorry.
that's not-
We definitely need a charter for that.
Yeah,
At least.
is there another way to pull people in? And do we have committee signups present at town meeting? And I mean, like actually sheets with people to put their names on, and we haven't in the
I don't
past.
think that's something we really need to address in a charter. I think that's something that needs to be addressed by.
We did try last year, we tried to bribe people with candy bars. We went to the trunk or treat. We had the town manager's office. We had a skeleton, so like former committee member on it. So- And then if an adult was willing to sign up to be interviewed to be on a committee, we'd give them a 3 Musketeers bar and get at least one out of it. We got a budget committee.
We try our best. We see vacancies, we reach out. in different
Well-
ways. But within our code, we have standing committees. And so all of these other committees, to include this one, is an ad hoc committee.
Oh, okay.
So the planning board, board of appeals, finance committee, board of assessment review, conservation commission are only standing committees.
I'm sorry,
Okay, so
that's- I'm
there
sorry,
was
sorry.
the other question.
So,
So 1 second, Jeanette. So can committees be added as standing committees? Is that,
That's a change of code.
okay, that's a change of code. If it were in the charter, though, wouldn't require an additional change of code. It would just be in the charter.
I would say so.
Okay.
I think so too, because they say that in a charter, you determine the distribution of who does what and who reports, that's what your job is in the charter. So I'm sorry, that was finance,
It's in chapter 6 of the code.
chapter 6. Okay. I can take a look, thank you.
So basically, I guess the issue is, do we need a charter in order to add standing committees?
Well, actually, I believe the definition of a charter is that it decides, it doesn't have to, but it can decide.
I would only caution, these are standing, we've been around for a long time now. I'd only caution on committees, you talk about structure of committees. We have a staff liaison that attends or is assigned to a committee.
Yeah.
Only caution what goes in there, it's gonna stay in there for a long time. We may not have the staff.
Yeah, that's a very good point, yeah.
Yep.
But actually, what I'm a little bit more concerned about, other than the actual committees, is how do committees, again, how does information, like some of the committees are passionate citizen committees. These people, in some cases, maybe they were drafted, as Denise says, but in some cases, people are really passionate, they're really interested in what they're doing, they may be very good at it. And in an operation like a town where there's such a wide range of things that need to be done, there may be no one person in the universe who is expert in every single one of them. Like probably nobody here in this room, I don't think is maybe you two guys are, but expert in policing. That would be something that many citizens would not be expert in. But then you have citizens who are engineers or they are physicists or something. And they may have expertise that is useful to add to the mix. But how could it work in some way better to get ideas or information or work from the committees actually to the point where a decision can be made on them, which probably means town chart, the warrant?
Well,
But I don't
I
think
think
that's
it's,
something for charter.
I think it is, because I think the definition of our charter says that we're supposed to be discussing the distribution of powers within the government. And,
but a committee is,
and
Not
deciding on the structure of the
I was
government.
gonna say committees.
committees are
don't
not
have
part of the
any power.
government, they're the citizens who are proactive, that care about the community, that are forming together to identify things that they would like to see done. I'm not sure we could question it, I'm sorry. However,
I
it's-
think that, and I think that it is fairly difficult sometimes to get information from the town. And also sometimes very difficult to get information into the town. And part of that is just that it's a fairly big organization. You know, if that makes sense, it's a fairly big organization. But I just wonder if there
Without
would
spec-
be ways.
I'm
to
not
do
asking for
that.
specifics, but without specifics, it's hard to kind of
Well, like,
discuss this.
you can, and I'd be happy to do that. Maybe we should put it on the list.
That particular one, I think, is something that can be addressed. It's not really something that you would address in a
I think
charter.
the list is more for legal opinion, right?
Yeah.
I think we should put it on the list.
The only committee thing that I think could be given additional powers would be maybe in a charter.
Yep.
Would maybe be the finance committee.
Right.
That would have some veto power over a selectman's budget.
Well, except that it's voted on by town meeting, so the finance board. You mean in terms of what's
Well,
presented, but, you know,
in terms of what's presented.
yeah,
But
but
then again, at the town meeting, the finance committee has the ability to stand up and amend the proposal.
They do?
Yes, everybody does.
No, they can amend
Except
it by
for-
moving money from one line item to the next, right? The
No,
same
you
way.
can add,
you can move it up or down.
in monetary warrant articles, you can add money, you can subtract money, you can move it around. You can do almost anything to the
Wait a minute,
monetary
I'm
items.
sorry, I need clarification. I thought that, like I, as a citizen, we'll get to the finance committee in a second. But as a citizen, I thought I could not come into town meeting and propose newly that we take $30,000 and spend it on my favorite project X. Right?
If it's a line item in the warrant,
Right.
then you can propose to increase or decrease that line.
Oh,
item.
okay, all right. And you can
However,
also, okay, okay. fair enough.
however, when you vote on the warrant article, you vote on the bottom line of the warrant article, not each individual line item.
Right,
So you have to, either subtract from the bottom line or add to the bottom line. And then you still don't have control over whether or not the selectmen actually spend it on that item.
Yeah, it's how it's allocated within that particular.
I'm sorry, you can
Department.
add to or subtract to from the bottom line, but not the individual items?
No, you can, what I'm saying is if you subtract from an individual line item, you want to subtract from the bottom. Or if you add, you want to add to the bottom.
Right,
However, it's the bottom line that is actually voted on.
oh, yes. I
So
see.
whether or not that money actually gets spent in that line item,
Huh,
is up to the,
oh, that's interesting.
It's up to the
All right.
select board and
is up to
town
the select
manager.
board.
So the finance committee, like a citizen, could do that same thing, right?
Yeah, they can stand up
Right.
and make
Okay,
amendments.
right, okay.
Although they
So-
participated in a long process, it would be pretty weird of them.
Yeah.
Unless there was
yeah,
disagreement within the finance.
I've seen them disagree.
Yeah.
Within our code, it describes what the finance committee's roles are, as well as within standing committees, which the finance committee is. And I'll just give you what they have in the standing committee paragraph. Finance committee, it shall examine all town meeting articles that call for an appropriation or expenditure of money, make its recommendations to the town meeting. When they get their budget, their role is to provide a recommendation to the select board.
Right.
So.
Well, actually, to the town meeting, right?
Into the town meeting. So when we have our budget meetings, they get the same budget that the select board has.
Right,
Department heads will do their presentations.
right.
They, all the lines there for the most part are there. And when I say for the most part, it has to come up a certain level, because otherwise we're talking about every little detail expenditure.
don't need to know how many pencils. Yeah.
Right, and they provide their sound advice recommendations to the select board to put on the warrant.
Right.
They have the hearing. And
Right.
then again, here it just talks about appropriations. So the items as you see in the warrant when it goes to town meeting, the finance committee is on to pass, not on to pass, is strictly for appropriations. When it comes to, say, a land use article or a change in ordinance for planning,
Right, we don't
that's a
want
select board recommendation to town
I'm
meeting.
sorry, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. The finance Finance
Recommendation.
committee,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, please.
Yes, it does.
All I meant to say was the finance committee was not involved in that piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right, but the finance committee makes the recommendation to the warrant? Or does then they make it to the select board and the select board decides?
They ended up doing it both. They kind of informally do it to the select board, because they all discuss it,
Right,
but then formally, the warrant says voted not to pass by both,
right.
or.
oh, I
or
see,
is it the-
yes, yes.
Divided opinion, it says
Right,
finance.
so in the
They may have different
I
numbers.
can provide a little bit of history on that. Back in the 90s, the selectmen would come together, meet with the town employees and the department heads, form a, talk to them and get justification, things like that. Now, and then the finance committee would meet and have those same people come before them and give them the same information. We, during that period of time, or after that, we started having joint sessions so that obviously the town employees don't have to be running
Doing the
around to a
same
whole
thing
bunch of
twice,
different, it just
yes.
made sense. And that way too, the selectmen heard the finance committee's questions and reasoning and vice versa.
Right,
And also during that period of time, we instituted a reconciliation meeting
Yeah, I was gonna mention that.
where the select board and the finance committee got together and discussed their feelings about individual warrant articles, and they either agreed to agree or agreed to disagree
I see,
on,
yes,
on that, and that's what was put into the warrant article. Because if you look on the warrant article, it will also show what the selectmen recommend and what the board is, what the finance committee recommends, and they can be different.
yes, I see.
And they have occasionally in the past been different, although not as much since the reconciliation meetings
Yeah.
began.
I mean, there was one town meeting where the entire select, or the entire finance committee budget was voted on and approved by the town, and basically they disregarded the select board, the
Yeah,
town manager and the select board's.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
One of the things that's evolved a little bit too, at least in my recollection, in my short time, is the finance committee will have its separate meetings still. The select board will have its separate meetings as well. This is outside of the joint meetings to discuss things that they want to discuss. And even this year and last year did the same, as participate in all of those meetings to make sure that everybody had the same message. To identify those things that are important to them or even not important, to make sure that they get the appropriate answers.
that sounds good.
So when they meet at the reconciliation meeting, hopefully everybody has their,
Everybody's on the same page
questions
a little
answered.
bit, yeah.
no, I might point out also that that schedule is on the town website, and those are public hearings, so anybody
yeah.
can come and
We've actually been doing
give their
remote
2
as well.
cents.
Yeah, and I'd say kudos for the remote. I listen to that while I'm at dinner, I'm eating my dinner, listening to it, it's great, it's just so great, it's really helpful. Well, that's really interesting, I didn't know how the finance committee worked, and I'm still not 100% sure, because I thought what you read said that the finance committee makes the recommendation to the warrant, and I'm not sure where the select board gets involved, but it sounds like it's working. I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of work.
There are two
It's kind of working.
recommendations on the warrant, Jeanette.
I know there are.
Yeah.
But what he read said that the finance committee makes the recommendation to the warrant, it didn't mention the select board. I'm not sure.
oh, no, I just read you specifically with the finance committee roles as standing committee. So if you look at the select board, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
I,
okay. Yeah,
It's a separate
right.
paragraph.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's very thorough in any event, and seems like it's working, yeah. And I've seen those two recommendations, I've always been interested in.
as a quick question, as town officials here, what, can you think of anything that a charter could address could address. I know you've already had, suggested one item. But is there anything you can think of that would really improve the town's ability to conduct business in the most efficient way that we can only do through charter? I mean, I think everyone's touched on some really great points tonight. You're the ones who were right here in the middle of it.
It's hard to say because the current select board, the staff that we have here make things go. So I haven't really seen anything that sticks out to me personally on how things work. If you need something done, it gets done. There may be some circumstances in the past here where people have had issues. I currently don't see it. The things that I know about are actually exist in our code that I've mentioned. So it could be rewording of some of those things that we brought up. As far as a charter, and I know because I worked in Brunswick for a short period of time, Mark came from Brunswick, so we saw both sides, one with charter, one without. Answer your question, Tam. Nothing that's impacted us, at least in my time here.
Well, now, wait a minute. Surely something could be improved.
I'm not saying it hasn't, but
You can go first, Peter. I wrote it down.
I was gonna hear what Mark, if Mark had
No, I'm
anything to add to that.
I guess just my two thoughts of looking at the list of things we talked
Yeah.
about is the one that you fixed with your warrant article, that to be able to select board could move 10%.
Yeah.
I think that's nice flexibility to have. And the other thing, I'm not sure, I think it would be hard to do a complete remote town meeting, although it's worth looking at and getting some ideas on. One thing I would like more ability to do is what we're doing tonight.
Hybrid.
And maybe Denise is gonna fix it in the legislature for us, but it'd be nice to have hybrid meetings that don't have to have such a high threshold, that you basically need to be sick out of town or whatever. Because I think when I look back at our public hearing, I thought we were, the one where I was excited when I saw 20 people in the attendee list, 20 people in the room. And I thought, that's a nice way to be able to run a meeting. And I think it went pretty smoothly going between people in the room, the meeting.
Mhm.
So if the legislature doesn't give us, and I guess the question is maybe we can't do it with the charter if the legislature doesn't give it to us. But it'd be worth exploring, I think, whether there's more ways to use hybrid meetings and stuff.
Okay.
I think that's really a good idea because, the world has changed. And especially with the pandemic, many people are online. It is a lot easier if you're busy. Like if I've just had a really busy day and I'm just coming off of work and I'm trying to get dinner and, it's really not hard to turn on the computer and just listen. But it is hard to come. It's harder to come. And I think you're right. And I do see there could be problems, but I think, yeah, you're right. That should be talked about. I wrote it down on my list.
What was that, Peter? I wrote it down.
One suggestion that I heard was possibly having in a charter that a selectman doesn't get paid if they don't show up for a certain number of meetings.
Hmm. I'm sorry.
Well, start off with paid, but you would have to have some form of recall in the charter. And it would have to be instituted by, I don't know, as you could actually, in a charter, fire a selectman for not showing up for half the meetings or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could actually do that, but possibly you could stop them pay if they didn't.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
a really,
question.
back in Pennsylvania, in the state law that governed boroughs and towns, if a council member, so not a select board member, a council member, didn't show up for 2 meetings, they were automatically off the council. Will of the voters or no, they had to come. If they missed 3 meetings in a row, they were automatically out, and then you had to have a special election to replace them. And they could run for it if they wanted to, but it's just, yeah, it's pretty fierce penalty for missing 2 meetings. So I think your penalty is milder.
I think
Might be
it
better,
depends
I
on
don't
what you can do within this state and what's allowed by
Yeah.
by state laws too. They vary tremendously, especially in New England. We're
Yeah.
having lived in, I don't know, Virginia for many years and a few other states. This is an
Well, yeah,
entity unto itself. And
well,
to
and
try to
Peter's idea may be
compare
a
it-
better one. I'm not, that might be a better idea. I'm just saying there is another extreme there, but it may be a better idea.
I don't know, if it's worth writing a whole chart or just put that in.
Well.
I don't know, it
there's
might
other
be.
things
We just
that
take that money and
there.
we could move it around from budget line to budget line, you know, that'd be really fun.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think it's a good point too.
Okay, all right, Denise, you're on.
I feel that one of the issues that all government has, and it's not just town government, but state government as well, is that it can feel impenetrable. That people like don't understand how they can really find out what's going on, what they should be interested in. And I'm just wondering if there's something about a charter that can help us to make town government more accessible, more penetrable. It's just a thought, because I have to tell you, the other day, I was sitting at my computer after committee and opened up Rose, always, I get the agendas from Rose. And I opened up the agenda because I always try to just take a look at them. And to me, the agenda was impenetrable. There wasn't anything there that helped me understand what was actually going to happen at the meeting.
How do you put that in the
When
question for
I
the
get
legal
the-
team, I guess?
I guess when I get Rose's email, it directs me to the town website and you check on the selectmen's agenda.
No, I opened the agenda, Peter.
Yeah,
I
but it
saw
has all of the documentation that goes to the selectmen as well. If you continue down the agenda, it has the information that is submitted to the selectmen for each warrant article.
The entire.
No, I'm not talking about warrant article. I'm just talking about
Well,
the meeting the other
The
day.
agenda, for each agenda item, I misspoke.
The entire agenda and all the backup materials included in those packets.
Now that you're.
Oh, is that right? So you receive the agenda by email, but if you go on the website, you can get the agenda and the packet.
Everything.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not getting the packet.
Yeah.
But actually, what Denise is saying is actually the same thing I was saying, just in a different form. I was saying we need a public access officer. It's the same thing. Government is impenetrable. That's the feeling from the outside of the government.
Except that in terms of the access officer, under Maine law, that's about someone who administers the SOAP. It's not about actually just sort of answering questions that citizens might have. That's a different, that would be a different thing.
No, but what's the same about it is that sense of impenetrability. That's what's the same, not the specifics in the least. Anyway.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, how do we phrase that so the legal office?
Is there
Yeah.
any way a charter can be used to make government more accessible to the public?
Yes, that's my question. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I think we should, right, can we increase the, can we require more than, and I think the answer is probably yes, we should be requiring even more than the state is requiring for open, transparent meetings. And I'll give you an example. The Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee has a big note on the bottom of all of their agendas that says they do not welcome public comment. Go talk to the town staff people. They don't take public comment. They're touching every single zoning ordinance in town, and they're not accepting public comment at their meetings. So if I wasn't paying attention and I have a good relationship with Rod, so I'll go talk to him about it, but it just doesn't sit right with me that right on their agenda, it says that they're not taking public comment at their meetings.
Yeah, Marilyn, this is Derek. I know that was an issue in the beginning, and the select board notified the committees to, or the committee to take that off the agenda. So we just want to make sure that it's still, that it's not still on there. But they've been informed to take that off.
It was on the last one I looked at, but you know, I think every committee in town should be accepting public comment, welcoming it, you know, and just going at, not just welcoming it, going after it, you know, and providing agendas that are really explanatory. And if that has to be mandated somehow, you know, that's fine, but it should just be the culture of the town is my personal opinion.
I agree with you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Marilyn. We'll check on that. That shouldn't happen.
But I think Marilyn's got a good point overall, though, about what the charter could do. It could require all boards and committees to be more open and more aware. I mean, they can set a distinct time within the meeting to allow public comment. They don't have to let people talk whenever they feel like it. But I think that's pretty important.
It was the thing to cheers, I think.
That's what I thought. Yeah, it's like funeral home music. I put it as my ringer because it makes me relax.
Sounded like that thing, John.
It's like the
Like
the
little
opening
shut-
music to the British, Great British Bake
Yeah.
I always feel like this when I get.
So they kind of flow. So we're looking for ways that a charter can be used to make government more accessible to the public and require more than just the basic requirements of the state in order to make public participation more something so that it could be improved and increased.
Yes. And people would feel like welcome and.
Yeah. So, I'm going back. I looked into this. I'm just going back to the 90s. I remember something having to do with the selectmen meeting that outside of, if it was on the agenda, public comments, but outside of that, the public had a right to attend, but they did not have a right to speak because it was a business meeting. I don't know if that's state statute or whether that was something local.
I looked at the agenda for the board of selectmen recently, at the bottom it says, please come and give your input. Like, it didn't say that exactly, right, but this is all input as well. You just have to say.
I mean, we always took comments from the public as we were doing the business.
Yeah.
But that sticks in my head that the public had a right to attend, but they didn't have a right to speak.
It's not a
Because it's a
requirement that they.
This is a
give the
business
right to-
meeting.
Yeah, in other words, you don't have to allow them to participate,
You can't,
but this way you can be sure they have to.
yeah, if that's something that we can do. I don't know whether that's
I
in
don't
state,
think it's
state law or whether it was just something codified, or maybe it was just a rumor.
No, I know
I
you
don't
don't, you do not have to require, you do not have to allow public comment.
Did Ed want to say something?
I don't think the planning board workshops allow public comment either. So when the planning board takes something from another committee and workshops it with them, I'm pretty sure there's not a public comment section.
There should, my feeling is there should always be a public comment section. That's just. That's
I agree.
the way a government should operate.
Well, I would think that if you're in a workshop, you would want public comment.
Yeah.
For what you're doing.
Yeah, you would think, yeah. I have one more item, it's a ridiculous item of accessibility, which is that when we hold a public meeting as a town, when we hold a public, we must unlock the door so that members of the public can come in. That's just a request.
I'm not adding that to the list. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right. I'm okay.
I'm making the executive decision.
Okay.
Along the lines of public comment, when I switched to kind of a different mode, it was after Jeanette had mentioned that Mr. Moore had sent that
Yeah,
email. but I've noticed that Mr. Moran has been in attendance tonight.
Oh,
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Oh, hi, Bill.
So what I might say in a loud voice so he can hear me, is if Mr. Moran would like to make a public comment, he just has to, I don't want to like force him on the screen if he doesn't want to be. But if he uses his raise his hand function on his computer so that we can see he wants to talk, we can elevate him and he can talk.
That's how we do it.
Yep. Or there's a section for comments.
And he does want to talk, so I will elevate him.
Go ahead.
Should be in the process of it.
We call it the wormhole. That transfer from the attendee to the panel, it's
Did you just hang up on one?
takes different.
Nope,
amounts
he's
of
appearing.
time. No, he's coming, he's coming.
Oh, there he
Ask him to
is.
turn on
So I
his,
think-
Oh, this is great.
Mr. Moran, if you unmute and if you're willing, turn on your camera, we can hear from you.
Here, you go, Bill. In the house.
Well, if I can see his face.
Well,
I'm
He's
terrible with
an old
names.
timer.
I'm terrible with names.
he wrote a beautiful letter.
You're now a panelist, Mr. Moran, you just have to take your computer off mute and then we can hear you.
And it was a place where the elves lived.
All right, you're now unmuted.
Check your microphone.
Well, while we're working on that, does anyone have anything else to add or things they'd like to see in the charter? I think we've got quite a list. What I will offer to do, if it will help, is take my notes and try to write up a list and send it to Mark so that he can.
Coordinate list.
I have a third list as well, so I'd like to coordinate lists. I think that sounds great.
I'll get my list from Pam, which I'm sure she'll coordinate with you guys.
Sounds fun.
And then my plan would be just to try to use our legal fees cost efficiently. If there's things that I can easily get the answers to, and I feel confident I've got the right one, I won't refer it to anyone. Next priority is if there's ones I think Maine Municipal can answer for free, I'll give it to them. And then if I think there's some, the last will be if it looks like something that I think we need to actually pay the town attorney, then we use them last.
So, the other thing is that if we do decide we want to do a charter, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot in this that we could just transfer over. Yeah, because they already, they wrote the section that declares town meeting, select board, town manager, form of government or form of government. They wrote a bunch of things like that.
And we don't need to reinvent it either, because not only what they worked on, but there are plenty of towns around that have charters. Yeah, I mean, other towns have got charters too. So for something that's kind of standard, the language is pretty easy.
Once we get the legal answer, I see on here you talk about public informational sessions. Does that mean we're gonna be reaching out for more opinions on these issues, or are we just gonna be informing, or what are we gonna do?
My thought, and that's why I put it on there to see how you feel. I'm thinking rather than just open it up as a free for all, maybe if we identify out of this list of 18 things, we actually settle on, say, 10 or something. We maybe take a couple of them at a time and say, these are the issues we're going to discuss tonight. Join us for a session. We can tell them what we've come up with, what we found, what we are looking at, and we can get input on it. Rather than just having it, a free for all.
I think that's a great idea.
I would love it.
It looks like Mr. Moore's
Is Bill muted?
mic is muted.
It was unmuted and then it went back.
Well, yeah.
Okay, Bill, if you want to speak, you need to unmute
Well, he did for a while.
and then see if you're having trouble with your
I think he
microphone.
did it again.
Okay, you're unmuted.
Maybe as a microphone, as a computer,
Yeah, I wonder,
it might have a desktop.
yeah. you might
I have a
a
desktop, but it has a microphone and everything. I use it all the time.
Yeah, but it could be,
But not every model.
it could be muted under the,
Yeah, that's what I'm
Computer.
wondering. It does.
Mr. Moran, since we can't connect right now, would it be possible to invite you to speak at our next meeting? We'll be meeting on March 2nd. I believe it is. Is that the second Wednesday?
Oh, yes, I think it is the second Wednesday, yes.
So I would certainly invite you either to join us here or join us via Zoom. We would love to hear from you and hear whatever additional thoughts you might have for us.
Maybe, maybe Jeanette could include his letter in our minutes when she sends them out.
I'd be
But that's a
glad
good
to.
idea.
Yeah,
Ed.
I'd be glad to.
Um,
It is a long.
Does that seem like a fair
Yeah.
solution for Mr.?
Well, I don't know that he would come in person.
Well,
I think
he
yeah.
can certainly call, come with a microphone.
Or he can write us another letter. He can do whatever. he
Yes.
wants, yeah.
He can call in.
Oh, he could call in, that's a good idea, yeah.
So we do want to hear from you. Now I see the hand. You have
No,
to
that's
Oh,
Mark's
that's the
hand.
picture. Never mind.
Yeah.
No, his
That's
hand's up
the
now.
hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Moore, you just don't have a microphone on your computer, because we should be hearing from you right now, because we've been able to hear other people tonight.
Yeah. Or he doesn't have the sound up or something.
Okay, I think this has been a great meeting. It's almost worth missing the curling semi.
Oh, is curling tonight?
It is, US and Denmark.
there's curling all the time.
I've gotten.
I would like to
I
try
wonder if
playing
there's
that
anything else going
sometime.
on.
I don't know. To me, that looks like a fun thing to try, sort of like petanque, but
Bring it up to
Nice.
Parks and Recreations to form a curling league. Okay, we will get the list together. Prioritizing, I think, can come back once we maybe get some answers from the attorneys. Other charters, again, I encourage people to pick some other charters. And maybe read through, especially sections that might address some of the issues here. And we will, at the next meeting, hopefully have a response and we can move forward from there. Does anyone have a better plan?
nope. That's a pretty
Anyone have a
good plan. And I think the idea of dividing the sections up after we get our answers and having some public meetings would be
Do
great.
you need a motion to adjourn?
Does anyone have any other public comments? Any other comments from the?
Oh,
Oh, no, I'm not waving. I'm just saying goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
bye, Marilyn.
Where are you, Marilyn?
She's in there.
I'm in Virginia,
Okay.
For you, whereabouts?
Be careful.
Is it warm?
Florida or bust, Florida. It is, it's like 70 degrees here. It's awesome.
Whereabouts are you?
We just got into Virginia.
Oh, whereabouts?
Let's see, Lake Ridge.
Okay.
Sounds
Would you
good.
like a
Yep.
Sounds
motion?
good.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Good night, everyone.
A unanimous acclamation. Thank you all for coming remotely and other.